Hello, I'm Tabitha.
Hello, my name is Chindi.
And welcome to The Radius.
The Radius Show.
Oh my goodness, we've been away for a while.
I know. How long has it been? Months?
No, I think it's only been October. I think we have lived...
Well, that's a month then, isn't it?
Right, and that's really not our motto here. We're about making progress, and that wasn't really progressive, huh? But there's been some reasonings why. We have adopted a lot of new practices. Like, I've been pretty good about working out and getting up at 4:30 a.m. as a result of attending Power Breakfast, which we've attended here. We've been consistent at that, at least.
Yeah.
I was recently, and I don't know if I announced this, I was recently appointed as an interim appointment to the school board, long story short. So that, basically, I had to acclimate myself in that new role, and that took some demands on my schedule, which I don't say I'm busy, I say I'm working very hard. So I worked really hard to be able to get back and work on this. And what have you been up to, Chindi?
Well, I got a new job.
Congratulations!
yeah, that's a new, different job.
Well, there's going to be an episode as a result of that all about interviewing and how to succeed, because our strategy worked, right?
Yes, it did. It actually did. It went there and worked. I just went and spoke and it worked out. And I'm realizing, like, wow, this is pretty good. And I think I'm going to use that interview strategy even in the future.
And we can help other people.
Definitely. It worked out for me because I was happy that I got this new job.
What else is new? It's the winter, kind of.
Well, it is the winter, but it's not that cold.
It's not formally the winter, but
yeah.
It makes my schedule slow down a lot, so that's good for the radius. I can focus on it.
Definitely.
You know, what would prompt us to come back on the air and talk? What would be the thing that would bring us back and make us want to talk all about it? What would be the momentous issue that we felt like we must come back and we have to do an episode?
Well, I think we just have to be disciplined. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if I've not been disciplined, you know, I mean, I think for you, you're very busy. I mean, doing the board and doing your job is not easy. But for me, I only have one job, and I'm like, I just want to sleep. You know, so I always find reasons not to do something. It's always a good reason not to do something, isn't it?
Well, we're definitely going to help ourselves and virtually help our listeners, because we're going to set a good example and do our best. Definitely. And we've had many ideas about what we could talk about and what we can jump back into. But the thing that sort of we wanted to talk about, because you have an interesting perspective on it.
Yes.
Maybe even an unpopular opinion, perhaps.
It's an unpopular opinion for some people.
But we've noticed there's been a change in the politics of Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And when people heard, the first day it happened, when people said the military, you know, has seized his palace and that he was, you know, basically it was unknown what was going on. Was it a coup? You know, there was a lot of despair on the internet, but you had a different reaction. What was your reaction?
Well, I'm sorry. My reaction was excitement. I was happy that this guy, Mugabe, was gotten rid of. And a lot of people on the left side, where I come from, the liberal side, don't agree with what I said. But my personal view was that, you know, I live close to the country. I saw that country turn from being a very wealthy country into a completely economic mess. And the reason why I have this unpopular opinion is that the strategy that we stick by our allies no matter what they do is the same strategy that is used by people on the other side, the right, okay, the conservatives. They'll say, oh, well, we want to look at your Mugabe. You know, Mugabe is your socialist friend. And to me, Mugabe is not Fidel Castro. And I think it's very important. He's not Maduro or Chavez or, you know, the president of Bolivia right now. He's not those kind of people who've stood up and tried to help their people make it in life or made a sacrifice for them.
Well, let's take a few steps back.
Yeah. Because
I want to speak as if our audience doesn't know much about Zimbabwe.
Okay.
So can you give them like a Wikipedia page, splash into the history and what you're really saying? So basically, in Zimbabwe had a lot of promise when he took over, because I remember, if being a Bob Marley fan, in his film, and basically I knew this anyway, he wrote a song about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was his biggest optimism about Africa, because one of his songs, one of my favorite songs he wrote was Africa Unite. So when Zimbabwe had the, England step away and then, a new power come into being, he was really optimistic about Zimbabwe, and he held it up as the beacon for where Africa was going. And I don't know where everybody else gets their perspective, but that was my introduction into Zimbabwe. In addition to knowing a lot about the history, about the ancient times with the Shona and everything, but that was my crash course into there's a place named Zimbabwe, and Bob Marley wrote a song about it. And then many other people, because he's memed all over the internet. We saw when he was at the UN, him and his cohort were sleeping, and people kind of thumbs up all over that and hearted it and things of that nature, because they thought it was kind of sticking it to the man, so to speak, oh, he's such a rebel. So can you provide some more context into that?
Well, Mugabe is a revolutionary hero. Okay, we can't take that away from him. He fought for the independence of Zimbabwe. He was actually imprisoned, and he was actually tortured during the time when he was under the UDI. Not the British, we have to be careful. UDI was a unilateral declaration of independence. This was a group of white folks, the white minorities in Zimbabwe, taking over the country and deciding that the British would no longer going to defend them enough, and they take over the country, and then they try to read the way South Africa was ruled and created some sort of apartheid state.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It failed because proportion-wise, the whites in Zimbabwe are not that many, and so they just couldn't sustain it. In South Africa, they're about 15 to 20%. In Zimbabwe, it was less than 10%. So you get the numbers. You look at the numbers, mathematically, it's impossible for them to be able to succeed. And finally, Ian Smith, who was the president of the UDI, gave in, and revolution won. They actually won. They beat the UDI. UDI could not sustain the losses, and the British had declared sanctions against against Northern Rhodesia at the time, and Southern Rhodesia, rather. No, Northern Rhodesia was Zambia, but Southern Rhodesia, and eventually the UDI lost. And so in 1980, after Mugabe's and his forces were able to force the Ian Smith regime into an agreement to give Zimbabwe independence unconditionally. So that's what happened.
So that's why he's a hero.
That's why he's a hero.
Okay.
The hero-like comes from the fact that a lot of people he worked with, there was a guy called Godfrey who he worked with, who was one of the revolutionary leaders of another group that had helped really conquer, who he probably wouldn't have won without him. And he went against him. Those were the Ndebelers, after him, and killed
Slow
them.
down. Just for our listeners, you said Ndebelers?
Yes, Ndebelers.
Can you give us some context?
Yes, I can.
Only because you taught me a few days ago. I got a little history lesson. History is like my strong suit, and he gave me a crash course in Zimbabwe history the other day.
Okay, so there's Ndebelers and there's the Shonas. There's two major tribes. Of course, there are others, but there are two major tribes, Ndebelers and the Shonas. So then the Shonas are the largest group. Mm-hmm. The Ndebelers are kind of the smaller group. But then the Ndebelers had ruled Zimbabwe for a while before the British took over, and then you had UDI, and then now you had Mugabe. When Mugabe took over, he was actually an okay leader. He wasn't bad, apart from his issues with Godfrey and the Ndebelers. He wasn't really a bad leader. He maintained the economy. He didn't go after the white farmers who owned most of the land and were producing most of the food production, and he made sure that the economy was well maintained. But I don't know whether it's age, maybe? I don't know.
Well, you made some interesting points when you explained it to me, because I'm on the fence. I'm neutral naturally, because when I'm ignorant of a nation's history, I don't like to weigh in yay or nay. However, you enlightened me to the Ndebelers situation,
yeah,
where you said that he basically, because they were a minority, he more or less treated them really poorly.
Yes.
And then you mentioned, what was the other thing? About taking the farmland, which some people hailed as heroic. I remember when that happened. Again, social media is kind of like the litmus test for how people feel about things.
Mm-hmm.
And when that took place, a lot of people hailed him as a hero. But you didn't think it was heroic. You thought it was short-sighted.
It was short-sighted. You have to have a strategy, because otherwise you're going to ruin people's economy. You got to think about the people. The people have to be the most important point of view. My major problem is not that only that he did the land reform. If he did the land reform and gave it to the people, sort of like Castro did, maybe Zimbabwe's economy would be much better. What he did was he took that land and he gave it to his cronies. That, to me, is the crime. The crime is not actually taking the land. Taking the land, well, I can argue against it myself. Professor Apple's against it. But I can understand where people are coming from when they take land from the oppressor. However, taking land from the oppressor and then giving it to your cronies doesn't help the situation. You're just making the situation worse.
That's interesting. So, those are those 2 points. And then you had another point you made. I remember you were making a comparison about why he was not like Mandela. I can't remember it now.
Yes, Mandela's model was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and to gradually reform the land reformation. So in other words, the white farmers still have to give up the land, but we're not going to take it at once. We're going to gradually give it to the people or force them to sell to the people, with the government subsidy, of course, government helping in, making sure that the people are trained to farm. And what has happened in South Africa is that there's a huge number of middle class that have developed in South Africa, and even black billionaires, in dollars I'm talking about, in South Africa. What has happened in Zimbabwe is the opposite, whereby the economy has tanked so much that the only rich people are the top politicians in Zimbabwe. And that is a sad state of affairs. And that is not supposed to be happening to a country that is as rich in resources as Zimbabwe. Now, Mandela's model was, let's have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Let's talk about things. Let's talk about the crimes that were committed. Admit publicly the crimes that were committed. I mean, some of the things that were admitted in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa was gross. There was not Truth and Reconciliation in Zimbabwe. I mean, you could look at it as a problem by itself, because the UDI committed a lot of crimes. If those crimes came out, it would have been great for the family members. So a lot of factors we're looking at here is, you have to learn. If there's a large enough group of people that have committed crime, but there's such a large number of people, white people in Zimbabwe, you have to find a way of accommodating them. Yes, you have to tell them your ancestors and sometimes your parents, in Zimbabwe's case, did commit crimes against humanity, but we have to find a way of making sure that they can be part of the new Zimbabwe, and he didn't do that.
Okay, so you're not just a angry Zambian expatriate.
Mm-hmm.
There are actually people back on the continent whom we've consulted, we're not naming names, who've expressed similar jubilant, sort of similar enthusiasm about this transition. Someone actually took some video of the celebrations downtown, and
yes.
I saw the video and it looked like Christmas or New Year's. It was pretty interesting to watch.
Yes.
So, aside from, can you give a temperature read of all the, just for our listeners, of all the varied emotions? Because you had some people, when you posted online, you were kind of explicit in what you felt, and you had some people kind of message you privately,
yes.
call you.
Yes.
And what were their feelings and emotions?
Their feelings was different. They felt that Mugabe was a freedom fighter who stood up to the Western world, and in speech as he did. My reservation is that he didn't do that in action. He did it in speech. He's good at making, oratory speeches. And he was right in many cases. When he made the speech against Western imperialism, he was right in saying that. I'm not going to take the words away from him. But to me, Mugabe is like Assad. Assad is kind of against the West, right? And he's right in doing that. But that doesn't excuse what he's doing to his people.
You made an excellent point. Now I remember.
Mm-hmm.
So as we approach the 15-minute mark, we try to keep it brief as per our listeners. We got feedback.
Yeah.
But you made this brilliant point, and I'm glad you mentioned. I remember now.
Yeah.
So you said when we give people hero status incorrectly,
Yes.
we don't permit the people in the country to actually get rid of them.
Yes.
Because we're because we create this sort of like false antagonism between us, the U.S., and them.
Yes.
And it becomes a us versus them dichotomy.
Yes.
But within their own country, they actually may be suffering. You mentioned a few examples actually internationally where these individuals actually may want to be rid of this person, but because we have our own antagonism with them, we kind of are cementing their place in leadership.
Exactly.
And if we were to say, you know what, we don't even care. Not that we don't care. If we were to say, you know what, let's focus on other issues or whatever. Let's not have this back and forth antagonism. The people who are tired of living that way would actually just unseat this person.
Yes.
That was the point you made, and now I remember.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you very much for reminding me of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's an excellent point. The point is that Zimbabwe is a very good example of why the West should not intervene in countries internally. Those countries themselves will figure it out. Look, any conflict that has been settled internally they've ended up doing quite well. I mean, Ethiopia did quite well because there was no internal influence. I mean, we can't go into Ethiopia's history. That'll be next time. You can do your research. Zimbabwe is a very good example. Mugabe, and how they're trying to get rid of Mugabe, they're not trying to throw him and shoot him, okay, which is probably what the West would have wanted. They're trying to have him honorably resign as an elders man, because that's a tradition in Africa, you see. You don't just go out. Now, I've said some things about him which probably other people are going to say you have no respect for the elder. That's one of the people said that to me already. But,
Backlash.
Yes, to be frank, that's the truth. They were right. In our culture, in Africa, you respect.
It's honorable.
You have to be honorable. Even if the elderly person has done something really bad, you have to give them the respect.
That's actually even in African American culture.
Exactly.
You can, no matter how wrong an elder may be, if you're the one to bug out on them, you are forever a bad person.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's a tradition, and it's very ingrained in African culture. And so the way they're trying to get rid of him is not to
humiliate
him, but to say, hey, you gotta leave. But here's a process where you can resign, and we're gonna tell you to do this. So they're not pointing a gun at him. They're not out humiliating him. They had him go out to university and give awards even though he's still technically under house arrest. They treated him with respect. They treated his family with dignity. So those kind of things.
By definition, when we elect a president, we have this 45 person record of a peaceful transition of power.
Yeah.
What did we just witness happen in Zimbabwe? The peaceful transition of power.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it was at the hands of the military, the strength of the military, but, from what we can understand,
it's peaceful.
It's peaceful.
And that is the great thing about Zimbabwe. Don't intervene. This is the thing that I'll say about Western nations is don't intervene. And for those listeners who are listening, encourage the Western, your politicians, not to encourage the government to intervene in these countries.
Or just, like me, I thought I knew a lot about Zimbabwe, and I knew a bunch, but you really enlightened me to all the factors. Because history you had a different perspective on it, and history is kind of different from when you're in the Western world, sitting at a desk, and then versus, being more or less on that hemisphere, in that hemisphere of the world, really witnessing it firsthand. So I think this is also a lesson for people to sort of engage in dialogue with people from other areas of the world. Why is it like this? Have a peaceful, respectful... They don't owe you labor, so they don't have to teach you. But if it ever goes, the conversation ever permits, find out, because you enlightened me a lot with those 3 points.
And I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much, Tabitha, for praising me. I would just say this in conclusion. There are other things that are happening all over the world. Zimbabwe is a very good model for this. North Korea is a good example. I'll summarize very quickly on that. And I'll say the US and other countries don't need to intervene in North Korea. Leave North Korea alone. They'll figure it out themselves with Kim Jong-un. Let them figure it out. Zimbabwe figured it out with Mugabe. And by the way, Mugabe is not as bad as Kim Jong-un. But let's look at things in perspective. And let the people themselves decide how they're going to deal with their leader. Not us intervening. I think it taught me a lot, that person. Let's be Switzerland for once. Let's stop being these countries that go out and send our militaries all over the world. I think Tabitha, you told me about how the US is on over 54 countries. And I was like, what? 54 countries? Are you serious? Maybe it's high time we stop. I didn't even know there were military in Niger until I had the news. And they in Niger, what?
Well, the nature of military operations are for them to be secret.
Yeah.
Worldwide. So that the reason why we found out about that is because naturally, unfortunately, those poor souls lost their lives. Rest in peace to them. But yeah, I saw an article about AFRICOM, and you can research it, Google it, and they said, forgive me, it's embarrassing, I don't off the top of my head know how many countries are on the continent, but it was the majority. If there were 50 countries, we have 50 states, they were in 48 of them or something crazy like that.
And why? For what? There's no need for that. That's Zimbabwe has taught us that. Let people figure it out on their own. They have their own way of settling things, and let the issues in those countries be settled internally. If we leave people alone, we'll be surprised at what we can get.
Well, that's some interesting things for our listeners to gnash on. Some interesting points.
Yeah.
This is why we call this segment Unpopular Opinion. The views and opinions are Chindi's, and I'm kind of intellectualizing with him, so forgive us. If you disagree, you're welcome to enter into a dialogue with us, because we respect everyone's space and their opinions, and we can only learn from discussion. And what we'll say is that we are going to work on our goal. Maybe we can leave on that note. Our goal is to be very accountable about how many. I already have episodes in my mind that we're going to do, so you can anticipate new episodes from us shortly. But we'll put this one up everywhere we are, which is most social media places, and let you marinate on it.
Right, and we'll see you guys. We'll talk to you later. Have a good night or good day whenever you're listening to this. And thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it.
Thank you. That's the radius. Have a great night.
Have a great night.